A soft orange sun sank behind the desert dunes, turning the sand into a sea of gold. A tiny cat named Marru walked alone, her small paws leaving trails that the wind kept erasing. She wasn't an ordinary cat. She was born in a small desert village where no one wanted her. People said she brought bad luck because her left eye was golden and her right one was blue. When she was born, her mother had been taken by a sandstorm, and the villagers believed Marru carried that storm's curse. But Marru didn't know any of that. She only knew hunger, loneliness, and the endless sound of the wind whispering through the desert. One evening, she reached a broken tent lying at the edge of the dunes. A boy named Sammy lived there, a shy orphan who spent his days repairing old metal toys he found in the sand. When Marru crawled weakly into his tent, Sammy was startled at first. Her glowing eyes looked strange in the lantern's light, but when she meowed softly and rubbed against his feet, he smiled for the first time in weeks. He shared his last piece of flatbread with her. Marru purred, curling beside him as the night grew cold. That night, a sandstorm rolled through the desert, howling and furious, but somehow, Sammy's tent stayed standing. When he woke up, the boy found Marru sitting at the entrance, her fur shimmering faintly as if she had fought the storm herself. From that day on, Sammy called her his desert guardian. Days turned into weeks. Marru followed Sammy everywhere, to the market, to the dunes, even when he went searching for metal scraps. Together, they built little wind chimes that they sold to travelers. People started noticing that whenever Marru sat near their tents, storms seemed to pass without damage. Some said she was magical. Others whispered again that she was cursed. Sammy didn't care. To him, Marru wasn't a curse, she was hope. One afternoon, while collecting metal near an abandoned well, Marru suddenly froze. Her fur bristled. Sammy stopped too. There was a faint cry coming from inside the well. Without thinking, Sammy peered down and saw a small girl trapped far below. The wooden cover had broken, and she'd fallen in. Sammy shouted for help, but no one was near. Marru looked at him once, then leaped onto the rim of the well and began climbing down, her claws scratching the stones. Sammy could barely see her shadow moving, but he heard soft meows echoing below. Minutes passed like hours. Marru's meows turned into faint cries. Then suddenly, the girl's voice rose louder. She was alive. Sammy found a long rope, tied it around himself, and climbed down. At the bottom, Marru stood beside the girl, licking her face gently, her glowing eyes bright in the darkness. Sammy pulled the child up first, then climbed out with Marru clinging to his shoulder. The girl's father, a rich merchant, returned to the village that evening and heard what had happened. He rushed to Sammy's tent, tears in his eyes, and hugged the boy tightly. "You saved my daughter," he said, his voice trembling. But Sammy pointed to Marru. "She saved her. She heard her first." The merchant looked at the cat, her eyes glimmering in the firelight, and said, "Then she's a hero." From that day, Marru became known across the desert. Travelers came to see her, the cat with eyes like the sun and the sky. Some offered gold for her, but Sammy always refused. They lived happily, their small tent now filled with gifts, food, and laughter. Yet, in Marru's heart, she sometimes looked to the horizon at night, hearing the faint call of the desert wind. Months later, one terrible evening, another sandstorm arrived, stronger than any before. The sky turned dark, and the village lights vanished under waves of sand. Sammy held Marru close, wrapping her in a cloth. The storm roared like a beast. Then, just as the tent began to tear apart, Marru jumped free, running into the storm. Sammy screamed her name, but she was gone. Hours passed before the storm calmed. Sammy crawled out of the wreckage, calling for her again and again. When the sun rose, the dunes were smooth, erasing everything. He searched until his voice broke, but there was no sign of her. Days turned to weeks, and though the people rebuilt the village, Sammy never stopped looking toward the horizon, hoping she'd return. One evening, as he sat by the well they once saved the girl from, He noticed something half buried in the sand, a small wind chime they had made together. He picked it up and heard it ring softly, even though there was no wind. The sound was gentle, warm, almost like Marru's purr. He smiled through his tears. Years passed. Sammy grew up, opened a small workshop in the town, and became known for building things that could survive even the fiercest desert winds. But he always kept one chime above his door, Marru's chime. Travelers often asked him why it never stopped ringing, even on quiet days. Sammy would smile and say, "Because a part of the desert watches over us." One night, during another storm, a merchant's caravan lost its way. When morning came, they swore they had seen a glowing cat leading them through the dunes, her golden and blue eyes shining like stars. Sammy heard their story and walked out into the desert alone. The sun rose, and for a brief moment, he saw a familiar shape sitting on a dune far away, Marru, tail flicking, watching him. Then she vanished with the wind. He smiled, tears streaming down his face, whispering, "Thank you for coming home, Marru." Even today, the desert villagers say that on stormy nights, when the sand dances and the wind hums softly, you can hear a faint purr in the air, the spirit of Marru.